One of the reasons why I wanted to research famous disabled business leaders in the first place is because my gut was that there are a lot of humans in our world, both present and in the past, who have contributed greatly to society and to culture and also had disabilities, and that's something that we're not aware of. Welcome to Chez Jeunesse, the place of new beginnings. My name is Catherine Hubert, and I founded and own a French-inspired cafe where, as a team, we are on a mission to change the way that our world understands neurodiversity and employs humans with disabilities. Our restaurant was born and is based in Greensboro, North Carolina, and that's where we practice and teach our mission and model. This is our channel where we dive in deep to who we are, what we do, and why we do it. Our hope is that this content is empowering to disabled and non-disabled humans alike, and that no matter what perspective you are coming from, employer, employee, parent, friend, or Chez Jeunesse fan, you feel welcomed, you learn something new, and you walk away with a deeper appreciation and understanding of humanity. Hi everybody, welcome back. The original plan today was to talk about famous disabled business leaders, and then as I started doing some research, my content started morphing and growing into some other topics and areas, which then eventually broadened just to famous disabled humans in general, while hitting on some problematic bias in the way that we in the world and the internet is talking about famous disabled humans in the first place. So we're getting into more things than I originally anticipated, but that is the life of disability advocacy work. There's a lot of layers to it, and so sometimes when I think this is just what we're gonna talk about or focus on, once I start to get into it, I realize, oh, there's actually a lot of other elements here that we can't ignore and that need to be touched on, and that is the case with today's content. So welcome. Come on in. We've had some new subscribers over the past couple of weeks, so welcome to our community. We are so excited to have you here. This content is designed to be conversational in nature, even though it is, I recognize, still a mostly one-sided conversation. You are listening to me talk, but the intent is that I'm sitting here, I'm at one of the tables in our restaurant. I'm sitting here with the idea that I'm looking across the table at you, and that this is designed to be inviting, it's designed to be welcoming, a place to talk about disability employment and advocacy and what that looks like in our world and what that looks like in my business, and to do that in a way that breaks down barriers instead of raise up defenses. So welcome, we're excited to have you here. Any questions, comments, thoughts that you have, would love to actually engage with you in the comments below and make it as two-sided as possible. Okay, so I started doing some research, truly Google famous disabled business leaders. And once I did that, then the headlines that started popping up immediately caught my attention. So it was like successful entrepreneurs who soared despite their disabilities, and rising above disability, the inspiring stories of 8 differently abled entrepreneurs. 10 entrepreneurs who overcame dyslexia to succeed in the world of business. And then there was one article that kind of listed each person that they were highlighting and then put under their name superpower and then what their disability was. So very quickly, I got distracted from just paying attention to the business leaders that we were trying to highlight, and instead being frustrated at the bias that was present in the celebration of those business owners. So we're going to talk about that first and explain a little bit of even the reason why I was wanting to cover this topic in the first place. And then we'll start to actually talk about the people. So what is problematic about the statements and the headlines that I just read? There are several things. Those of you who've been following our content for a while probably already are picking up on them, but I'm going to run through them real quickly here. Number one, it paints disability to be very all-encompassing to someone's personhood instead of an element of their personhood. So it's very highlighting disability specific instead of highlighting the person, and noting that disability is part of who that person is, but that it's not all encompassing. Number two, some of the language just wasn't even current or accurate. So using disability euphemisms, which if you have not seen our video on the danger of disability euphemisms. That's one of my favorite videos that we've done, and you can check it out here. But differently abled is one of the euphemisms that we discourage against. We also discourage against saying that someone's disability is their superpower. And then that's where a lot of disability euphemisms get into trouble, is the intent is usually to put a more positive spin on disability, but in doing that, we are acknowledging that disability is wrong or bad or something that needs to be fixed. It is none of those things, so it can just exist as it is. We don't need to change that. By saying that someone's disability is their superpower, it, one, feeds into this idea that disability is bad, so then we're trying to overcorrect and make it into a superpower instead. And or it can also take away from the fact that disability can and does present, oftentimes because of culture and the way that we live in our world, obstacles or barriers for someone to face, and it sometimes, oftentimes, leads to prejudice or discrimination. And so saying that someone's disability is their superpower can inadvertently take away from some of the life experience that that person may have had, and is also a skewed or biased view of disability in the first place, thinking that everyone who has a disability is particularly gifted in another area of their life. And then again, that's where it's also layered. This is where I really got stuck in this content very quickly. This idea that disability makes you less than in one area, but then gives you a superpower or an extra gifting in another area, instead of just accepting disability as part of the human experience. And that's going to show up differently in every person's life, and letting each person have their own experience instead of a non-disabled person projecting or imposing what they want that experience to be like for that person. So that's the gist of why a lot of those headlines are problematic. Why is it important for us to talk about and engage with this content in the first place? One of the reasons why I wanted to research famous disabled business leaders in the first place is because my gut was that there are a lot of humans in our world, both present and in the past, who have contributed greatly to society and to culture, and also had disabilities. And that's something that we're not aware of. The reason why I think that's important is because there is a bias and a stereotype that people with disabilities are less capable or contribute less to society and to the world than a non-disabled person. We do not believe that is true. And so raising some awareness, taking some time to educate around humans with disabilities that have made big contributions to society is a way of breaking down that bias and that stereotype. I recognize as I'm saying this, and I recognize as I was writing the content for this week, I was like, it's a little backwards, because the hope and the goal is that we get to a place in our world where all humans, disabled or non-disabled, have equal access, rights, and opportunities, which means that they're all getting celebrated equally for the contributions that they're making to our world. And disability, whether it's present or not, doesn't need to be as overtly stated, because it becomes normalized. Someone with a disability having an achievement, contributing greatly, making changes in our world and our society, that becomes commonplace. And so it's not this like, woohoo, look what just happened celebration, because it's happening so much more regularly. Not that celebration doesn't still get to happen or exist, but the celebration, because the person is disabled, becomes less of the focus point, and just the person and the contribution that they made becomes the focus point. In that being the goal, I recognize that we're kind of working counterintuitively to it initially in order to raise awareness, to break down the bias, so then it becomes the norm, which feels complicated. But if anyone else has a better idea or way of doing that, I'm totally open to it. But that was the thought behind this, of raising awareness, changing the bias, eventually moving towards a society and a world where that becomes the standard. All of that being said, we're moving what feels like backwards in order to move forwards, and recognizing that the way we are celebrating famous disabled business leaders in our world today needs to still shift and change in order for that recognition to truly be fair and equal, and not at all patronizing or biased. We're going to attempt to do that here today in this video. So thanks for being along for the ride and for making it this far. Chez Jeunesse teammates, your keyword for this week is eucalyptus. So here we are. We've arrived at probably the reason why you clicked on this video in the first place, which is we are going to talk about some famous disabled humans, not specific to business leaders, who have made big contributions, who've been key in our history, whether that's in the past or more recent history. And my goal in this, as I was doing some research, was to hopefully draw some names that you may not already, you'll know the names because they're famous, but you may not know that this person also had a disability. That was kind of my goal. The way that I've broken it down, I've kind of grouped things by different disabilities. We're going to hit them in some categories. That was more so just for my sake as I was researching. And then it's varied. We've got some artists, we've got some scientists, we've got musicians, we've got civil rights activists, we've got actors. We've got a variety here. I initially was trying to just stick to business leaders. The goal behind that is because our goal as a business is to eventually see a world where we see a lot more disabled business owners. So if you know that about us, you know that my goal is to eventually write myself out of a job. I'm not trying to perpetuate a model where non-disabled business owners hire disabled employees, but instead move our world towards disabled and non-disabled employers, hiring people with and without disabilities. We're part of pushing that needle, but it needs to push further. So anyways, that's why the original focus was on business leaders. And then as I got into it, I decided to expand it. There's this this ended up being so much more layered than I was expecting. I don't know why. I think I just originally was like, this is a fun and a catchy thing to talk about. And then I got into it and I was like, oh yeah, systemic issues. They're present and we're dealing with all of them. So a lot of the lists that I found initially too mainly talked about white business owners or business leaders or historical figures. I was like, that is also problematic. White individuals in general getting more celebration and screen time than people of color. So then we were doing some extra research to also make sure that we were including people of color in this list. So here we go. Here's the list. Sorry, this was not what I was thinking. It was just going to be this little blippy thing. And then, nope, we're talking about all this stuff. So here we go. Dyslexia. We're going to talk about dyslexia. First, this was actually the disability that I came across the most as I was researching. Lots and lots of people who have publicly stated they have dyslexia, who are famous, and who are doing big things in the world. The few that we are going to highlight: Steve Jobs with Apple products and Apple company, of course, super well known. A few that are not alive anymore, but that have also made huge contributions to our world and history are Albert Einstein. There's also suggestions or hypothesis that Albert Einstein was also autistic based on the testing that was available at the time of his life. That is not confirmed, but it's a suggestion. Leonardo da Vinci and then also Picasso as two famous artists. Leonardo da Vinci was alive before dyslexia was a term or a concept, but it's assumed based on the information that we do have about him and about his spelling that he was dyslexic, and then Picasso was confirmed to be. So that is our category of dyslexia. Autism. Temple Grandin is someone that you may know if you're familiar with the world of autism, is an author, is a disability and autism advocate, is part of animal welfare. And then Bram Cohen, who invented a software company called BitTorrent that is used widely with Microsoft. When I was doing some research about him, he is still listed on several sites as having Asperger's syndrome, which is now disappeared as a diagnosis and is all just included under the umbrella of the autism spectrum. So that's why I've included him here under autism. Epilepsy, Elton John, which I did not know. Some of these I didn't know, some of them I did, but a lot of these were a surprise to me. Elton John, and then Harriet Tubman, who was abused by a slave owner and suffered a traumatic brain injury as a result. And then again, epilepsy wasn't a medical diagnosis that was necessarily available during the time of her life, but she experienced seizures throughout her life post-traumatic brain injury. So I am putting her in the category of epilepsy. Dyspraxia, which is a developmental coordination disorder. Daniel Radcliffe, and he's actually spoken quite a bit publicly about dyspraxia and what that's been like for him in his experience. Deaf and hard of hearing. Beethoven came up obviously as a famous deaf person, but I was like, that feels like that's kind of a given and one that maybe people already know, but Thomas Edison was one that I did not know. He was deaf in one ear and hard of hearing in the other. And then for some of our more physical disabilities, Frida Kahlo had spina bifida as a child and then also had polio as a child, and so both of those impacted her physically. Fannie Lou Hamer, who is a civil rights activist, had polio as a child and was also beaten in jail and had physical disabilities as a result of both of those things. This was one of my favorite people that I did some research on, became a champion for Black disabled humans to vote. She was really in the civil rights activism world. She pushed for voters' rights and for Black votes, and then had a specific focus on Black disabled voters. That's kind of the snapshot for today. I know I kind of ran out of time with all of the content at the beginning to get into a lot of information about each of those people, but would love to hear in the comments ones that you knew of, ones that you were surprised by. And if you have any follow-up questions, would love to come back and maybe do another video about that in the future. We're gonna stop there for today. Thanks for being here. I'm so glad to have you as part of our community. If you have other famous disabled humans that you know of that you would like to be included in a future video, please drop them in the comments below. Again, if you liked this video and you want more content from us, then we recommend our video on the danger of disability euphemisms, since that ties into the content that we were talking about today. We will see you next week. I totally blanked. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. I'm sure if I stroke my hair, my thoughts will come back to me. They might not. I think they might be gone.